I think we generate the results in life that we think we deserve. It's not about the money. It's about finding a way to be who you are in your own paradigm. You have to decide.
When should people know that it's time to leave a dream they've accomplished, or that it's so good, but it's not what they want anymore? Like, how can they let that go?
You know, the worst thing you could ever do is if you're pursuing the wrong dream, or if your dream changes and you don't change with it. Like, for example, let's say that you work to become the best accountant in the entire world, and you achieve that goal only to find out that being the best accountant in the whole world was not what you really wanted to do. What you really wanted to do was be a drummer or sell shrimp out of a van down by the river. And you worked to become the best accountant in the world, and you did. But once you got there, you realized this isn't what I wanted. Or it's what I wanted at one time, but it changed. I changed, and I didn't evolve my goals with it. And, you know, when I left that, I actually started a company in trial sciences called CSI, before CSI was ever on TV, Courtroom Sciences, Inc. And it was a trial science firm where we did trial strategy, jury selection, mock trials, shadow juries and trials. And
that's how you met Oprah, right? Didn't you help her with the trial she was doing?
I helped represent her in the Mad Cow case in Amarillo. And I did that for 12, 15 years, and I came to a point then, is right when I started Dr. Phil, and I remember the day that I hit the wall in that profession. I had done everything you could do. I represented every major airline in the world. I represented all the 9 major film studios out here. I represented half of the Fortune 100. I was involved in the tobacco litigation, the breast implant litigation, everything you could imagine. I'd done virtually everything you can do in that profession. And I remember a day a truck pulled up in front of our building, was literally an 18-wheeler pulled up with a file for a case, and the copy bill for the file was $1 million.
Oh my gosh.
And it pulled up, and I had one of those moments where I went, oh my God. And it was like, I really wish they hadn't pulled up.
Oh my gosh.
That's when it's time to go do something else.
Interesting.
When just to copy the file's $1 million, that's good business.
Yeah.
That's a good case. And you're going, oh God.
You don't want to do it anymore.
That means I got to read it. That means I got to get involved in it. And I thought,
it wasn't worth it anymore.
I'd done it all, and I was living on the road. I had trials going in Pittsburgh, LA, Houston, all over the country, and I was traveling all the time. And I thought, I've done it all. I don't want to do it anymore. And that made the decision to launch Dr. Phil real easy.
Right. I mean, did you have Dr. Phil already before then, or
I'd been doing Oprah in Chicago on a weekly basis for 4 or 5 years. And then it was time to launch Dr. Phil itself, and I could have done both, and I decided, no, I'm going to sell my interest in this and just go all in on.
What do you think would have happened if you did both, as opposed to saying, I'm going to put all my effort and energy into this one platform?
I don't think I would have done justice to either one, because I think I fastly found out when I got into doing my own show here, I fastly found out that this is not a part-time thing. I mean, this is you've got to be body and soul.
Yeah.
And be here just really involved in content, format, story selection, everything from designing the studio to, I mean, everything. It became all consuming. And I was into that about a month or two and realized that before we ever got on the air, a year before we were on the air, and said, this is not something that you can do as a part-time thing. You either got to go all in or not at all.
And it sounds to me like you are extremely invested in the whole process of the show, of the production, of the crew, of the stories, every decision you're involved in. And I think a lot of people, I think I heard you talk about this somewhere actually, that people don't know how hard it is to do a talk show or anything of a big production. They think they can go in with their expertise and it'll be great. But you had decades of expertise, but then you had to develop so many other skills, it sounds like, right? To learn about TV, learn about content, learn about storytelling, and you haven't stopped.
Yeah, it depends on, you can come out and be talent and show up and be a pretty face and do what you do. But if you're really going to succeed, and it's a different situation, and from the beginning, I own my own show 100%.
Wow.
And, that just doesn't really happen.
No.
Nobody really does that. But I approached it, as a business and run it as a business. And to do that, you've got to be involved. And then we launched The Doctors, which we own 100%.
Wow.
And, we've launched other shows, and, we have a very large involvement in it at every level, production, distribution, international formatting, everything, and all the shows that we do. So it's not just a matter of showing up and doing that episode. It's a matter of your distribution deals domestically, foreign, formatting, your facilities, everything. So there's a lot that goes into it.
How long did it take for you to learn that process to be able to own 100%? Because you didn't own it 100% at first, did you?
No, I didn't. But the third year,
really,
I took over ownership of it at that point.
That's impressive, because it's a big undertaking. Yeah. I mean, it's a big investment. It's a lot of you could easily fail and lose all this money.
Yeah, when we started out, I was Harpo owned it, and I was a profit participant.
Okay. You got a talent fee plus an executive producer fee plus
and it was a sharing in the profits, and then at that point we flipped, and I became the owner, and she became a profit participant, and she said exactly what you said. She said, "Yeah, if you want to do it, you can, but understand you're taking on all of this and all the liabilities and stuff." And she said, "I know you know that, but just know if that's what you want to do, you can do it." And I said, "I understand," and I did, and it's worked out great for her and for me, and we're still partners, and it works out great. And,
so there's still profit sharing there for her then. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's no risk for her, and she's still involved, and that's exciting.
Yeah, she's a great partner.
And I saw that you, I love this about you, that you really care about your relationships. You really continue to acknowledge people for years after they've believed in you and supported you. And I saw that you send Oprah 2 letters a year for the last, 20 years it sounds like. And this is something I think people don't understand, the power of an acknowledgement. And a continued acknowledgement of just like a thank you and here's how much it means to me. When I saw a clip of you and her talking about that, she was like, "You have no idea how much this means to me. Every year I get those." And you said, you don't get thanked enough in your life. Why is acknowledgement so important for you to continue to do? Not just like, "Oh, thank you for giving me this, opportunity. I'm done telling you thank you." Why is it important every year to do it for you?
Well, I think you got to dance with who brung you. And, I hate these people that, wake up on third base and think they hit a triple, as the old saying goes. I don't think there would be a Dr. Phil if it wasn't for Oprah. And So, here we are 20 years on, and, I've got a well-established brand, and people know Dr. Phil and all of that. And, that's all well and good today. But 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. What was the case was that Oprah generously, unselfishly pushed me to the forefront.
Wow.
And I will never forget that.
Wow.
There were times when I was on the Oprah show that she got off the stage, went into the audience, set up a table beside her chair for some hot tea, and said, "Take over the #1 platform in the history of television. It's yours. What do you got for me today?"
And you hosted it.
And turned over the show.
Wow.
On a regular basis. A lot of people, and I enjoyed great success on the Oprah show, and there were a lot of people that would be threatened by that those were the highest ratings of the week most of the time. There were a lot of people that would maybe be threatened by that or whatever. Not her. She just kept pushing me to the forefront, pushing me further, pushing me further, pushing me further. And just unselfishly and generously did everything she could to establish me and my brand and support me in everything that I did. When I came out here to launch the show, the first one I shot, she was in the control room. She came out at the break. She was there. I shot my 1,000th show. She was there on the stage in the control room. 2,000th show. She was there.
No way.
In the control. 3,000th show. She was there in the control room. Just has been such a loyal, generous supporter, and till the day I die, I will thank her for everything she's done for me and for my family. And I don't now enjoy this success and forget who brung me to the dance.
That's beautiful. And so do you have like a certain dates that you send these letters, or is it, I mean, you guys talk all the time, I'm assuming, on the phone and chat, but
we do, but
why do you still think it's important to send letters even though you're talking on a consistent basis and telling her like, thank you again so much, and seeing with her all the time?
I just think it's important to sit down and thoughtfully kind of recount what's happened during the last year with myself and Robin and Jay and Jordan, who she's very close to, and just let her know what's evolved. And, I call it the O factor, because, you always think about the metaphor of throwing the pebble in the pond and the ripples out. With the O factor, it's like throwing a meteor in the pond, and there's a tsunami everywhere, and it just keeps going and going and going, and it's impacted my boys, which she has such a close relationship with Jay and Jordan, and how it's affected their lives and all across time, and just had such an impact. And I just don't ever want her to forget that we know that.
Right.
And
you're not too good for her, or you think it's all you now, and you're the one who created this success on your own? Or?
No, and I hope I've given back to her along the way as well. She's called me in some tough times, and I never cease to take that phone call. But I can spend the rest of my life and never repay her for everything she's done for me and mine, and I never hesitate to say that. That's why I said, people say, what's your secret to being #1? I said, Oprah quit. She's #1.
Right.
It's just she retired. And so I
you kept showing up. Yeah.
That's right.
Who would you say is the most influential person in your life growing up, the most influential figure, whether it be a parent or a coach or a mentor or family friend?
Clearly it was my dad, and both negatively and positively.
Yeah.
I haven't had a drink in over 50 years because he was a bad alcoholic, and I just said, I will never go down that road. He was also the hardest working man I've ever seen in my life. I got a tremendous work ethic from him.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody work as hard as him.
Wow.
He was never tired. He never gave up. He always fought, and I respected him for that, and I hated that he was an alcoholic, but I also understood it too. I know a lot of what he went through growing up, and he self-medicated a lot, and I don't excuse it, but I understand it. And,
sure.
He was a big factor in my life, and I had a football coach in high school that was a big factor in my life. He helped me graduate.
Got you to show up to class and make sure you showed up. Yeah,
he did, and I think that you take those lessons along the way, and I used to have coaches tell me when I was playing football, they give you that, you've heard it.
Yeah.
Man, football teaches you about life. Rolling your eyes. And
It does, though.
And, you roll your eyes and yeah, right, come on. But the fact of the matter is, it really does. I can't think how many times it was a minute, 10 seconds left in the game and you're 13 points behind, and somehow or another you wind up winning and you lose. It ain't ever too late.
It's never too late.
You never quit till it's over, and I've learned that. And even playing tennis, there are days that I'll be scheduled to do 2 shows. We wind up doing 5.
Oh man!
And if I didn't play tennis every day and stay in shape and stay sharp and work out and stuff, I wouldn't be able to do 5 television shows in a day. The competition and the conditioning and stuff, I mean, I've just been a jock all my life. And that's when you reach down and pull it out and gut it up and get it done.
That's it. Just dig deep, Dr. Phil. I like it.
You have to. And you can be tired later.
That's it.
That red light comes on, you do what you got to do.
I'm curious, what was the biggest lesson your dad taught you, and also the biggest lesson this coach taught you?
They both said it kind of the same way. Big time players make big time plays at big times.
I love that.
And they both said that to me, and I've been captain on the teams that I've played on, and it kind of pushed me into a leadership role from a very young age. And I really think I'm fortunate in that I really feel like that I'm in one of those jobs where everything I have ever done has prepared me for what I'm now doing.
Wow.
And, there are a lot of jobs that you wouldn't be able to say that about.
Right.
If I was a heart surgeon, for example, I wouldn't necessarily be able to say that, but because I deal with human nature and human interaction and all of those things, then being parts of a team, having been very poor, having been homeless when I was a teenager, having been in these different situations and scenarios, I think has allowed me to, not be judgmental of people, because I've been where most people have been, and I also understand, what they face. I know what it's like for a kid to say, I could never take my friends home because I never knew what I would find when I opened that door. I never knew if the utilities would be on or off. I never knew if my dad would be drunk in the driveway. I never knew if he would have attacked my mother. I never knew if, when they talk about that, I understand because I've been there.
Right.
And I don't relish that, and I'm glad that my children didn't go through that. But since I did, I've at least been able to apply it in relating to the people that I sit with sometimes that are looking for some guidance.
Right.
And having been in those scenarios, both negative and positive, I'm able sometimes to relate.
Yeah.
and they understand. He gets what I'm saying. I can see it in his face. He understands.
How do you think you stay so relatable to people? Even though I think Ellen had a show, I think it was called Relatable or something, like a Netflix series that was about trying to stay relatable as she earns however much she earns a year. How do you think you stay relatable with just the success you have, being a TV personality, a big entrepreneur and businessman? How do you keep that relatability?
Well, I hope I do.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is growing up in the South.
Mm-hmm, yeah. The accent.
Yeah, maybe that's part of it. But we moved around a lot. Mm-hmm. It almost sounds military because I went to 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade in Tulsa, 4th, 5th, and 6th in Denver, 7th, 8th, and 9th in Oklahoma City, 10, 11, and 12 in Kansas City. Then we moved every 3 years, not by design. It just worked out that way. And so I was always the new kid. Mm-hmm. I always had to be making friends. Mm-hmm. I always had to be taking down barriers and finding a way to fit in. And I think that's why athletics were such a big part of my life because, as you know, I mean, God, you've been a decathlete and you've played all of these different sports. When you're a jock, you have an immediate peer group.
Absolutely.
And if you don't,
guy friends right away.
Exactly. Yeah. If you don't, you're just standing there, looking around like nobody to sit with at lunch. But if you show up and you can run fast and jump high, then you have something in common with somebody.
Right.
And so I always found a peer group everywhere I went and fit into the group in that way. And that helped me in so many ways. Like I said, I went to high school in Kansas City, and half of the team was black and half the team was white, and you fastly realize there's just absolutely no difference, and you learn right away that there might be cultural differences in practices, but human beings are human beings, and I got comfortable with that from a very early age, and I was so glad that I did.
Yeah.
And that served me well, my whole life. Whereas there are a lot of kids grew up where they were never around. They lived such a homogeneous life. They were never around anybody any different than themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's not true in athletics, as you know. Yeah. It doesn't matter. If somebody can run fast and jump high, that's all that matters. You don't care if they're polka dot.
Yeah. Can they help you win?
Exactly.
Are they a good person on your team? Do they have a good attitude? Do they work hard? That's what you look for, those characteristics. I played football, arena football in Alabama for a year. I was one of the only white guys on the team. Yeah. And they cared, could I play the game?
That's right.
Could I ball? Yeah. And if I can ball, then I'm good enough to hang with them.
Yeah, doesn't make any difference. And then it extends off the field.
Absolutely.
And so right away you learn, we're all the same.
Yeah.
And I think I got that instilled in me really early. And you just relate to everybody.
Yeah.
And
you talk about being a big time players make big time plays at big moments, big times. If someone's not a big-time player in their life right now, or in their career, or relationship, or business, how can they become a big-time player to be able to make big-time plays at the right time?
Well, I think everybody can. I think that's the whole point. Look, if you don't star in your own life, who's going to?
Absolutely.
I mean, think about that. I think it starts with this. I think you've got to decide that you're going to be who you are on purpose. Don't wake up every day and let the world tell you who you are, who you're going to be. And I think a lot of people do that.
What do you mean by be you on purpose?
Well, the world is going to tell you who to be and where you fit in. Your parents have an expectation set for you. Your job has an expectation. Your community, your church, everybody has a slot for what they expect you to do. And that may or may not be who you really are. And I think you have to make a decision about who you really are, what your values are, what you believe, what matters to you, what doesn't matter to you. And you've got to decide, I'm going to embrace those values and pursue those goals, and I'm going to do it on purpose, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm going to be who I am, and I'm going to do it on purpose. And so when you say, what are you doing, and why are you doing it? I'll say I'm doing A, B, and C, and I'm doing it on purpose. Like me, don't like me, but that's who I am, and I'm doing it on purpose. This is not a mistake. Look, I believe in a defined brand.
A defined brand.
A defined brand. Look, do you think anybody's going to confuse me with somebody else?
No. No.
No, seriously, you're not going to confuse me with somebody else. There are a lot of people out there that have fine brands. They're good people, and what they do is good, and they have a lot to contribute. But like Marianne Williamson, I know Marianne. She's a wonderful woman. She's very spiritual, and she's kind of ethereal, and she's into those. That's not me.
Yeah, we've had her on the show. She's great.
She's terrific. Isn't she terrific?
She's great. Yeah.
But
it's not your brand.
Not me.
She's not a.
And she's not me, and I'm not her. But there's a place for both of us.
Absolutely.
And there's room for both of us. There's a place, but you're never going to confuse my message with hers, or hers with mine. But I love her. I think she's got a great message. But she's got to be who she is, and I got to be who I am. And it's like McDonald's and the Palm. You're not ever going to go into the McDonald's and expect to get a 5-pound lobster, and you're not ever going to go into the Palm and expect to get a Big Mac and fries. They have defined brands. They are distinct. They're good at what they do. You can't ride two horses with one ass. You got to decide, all right, this is my brand, and this is who I'm going to be, and I'm going to ride that brand. That's me. And I think that's what I mean when I say you got to be who you are on purpose. I'm very straightforward.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you the truth as I see it. Now, you may disagree, and if you do, and what I say won't withstand challenge, throw it out. 100%, I am not the repository of all knowledge. And if what I tell you won't withstand challenge, hit the eject button and move on. If you don't like what I'm saying, that's why you have a remote control.
Right.
Hit that up or down button and move on to something else. Got it. But I'm going to be who I am on purpose. I'm going to sink or swim, not based on what somebody else decides I should say or do. I'm going to do it based on what I believe at the core of my soul I need to do. And there are a lot of psychologists that take the approach like, well, how does that make you feel? Well, tell me, how does that make you feel? That's a valid approach for people to discover certain things. That's not me. That's not me. I'm not going to talk to somebody for 6 months and then say, you're an asshole. Right. If I know that in the first 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you, you're an asshole. You don't need to talk to me for 6 months for me to tell you you're a narcissistic jerk. Work on that.
Right.
I'm going to tell you right now. And if I'm wrong, then fire me and go get somebody else. But I'm not going to wait 6 months to tell you that. I'm going to tell you what I believe, and I'm straightforward. And I know a lot of 75-cent words. I just try not to use them. I can tell you you're a schizophrenic mother with conflicts here, there, and other, or I can just explain what that means. I would rather just explain what it means.
Yeah.
And that's my brand. I don't think common sense is nearly common enough. And so I try to present common sense information to people's homes every day for free.
Yeah.
And that's worked for me. And that's a brand that I embrace. And so I am who I am on purpose, and I don't apologize for it. Some people may think I'm a barbarian. Some people may think I'm the second coming of common sense. I wouldn't disagree with either one of them.
Right. You are who you are, though. What happens if we don't get clear on our values and we're being someone else on purpose, but not ourselves? What happens to us?
It's not authentic. It's not ever going to work. Look, if you're not authentic, if you don't really... to me, it's congruency. If you're not congruent with what you really believe at the core of your soul, then you're incongruent.
Yeah.
And it's not going to work.
Right.
It's like an airplane that's not aerodynamic. It's like flying with your gear down. It's not clean. It's not going to move. And if you are congruent, then it's going to feel right to you. Yeah. Remember when you were a kid? We've all done this. When we're a kid, we'd get in the swimming pool, we'd have a beach ball, and we'd try to hold it underwater.
And it just pops right up.
You wear yourself out holding it underwater. It keeps popping up this way and that way. To me, that's what it's like when you're denying who you really are.
Oh, man.
You're holding that beach ball underwater. It keeps trying to pop up. Let it pop up. That's who you really are. And that's what I mean when I say be who you are on purpose. Let that beach ball pop up. That's who you are. And that's what I do. I'm not... and you got to know who that is, and you got to stay in your lane. You've never... I don't know how many of my episodes you've watched, but you've never heard me tell anyone what to do with their 401k.
Right.
You've never heard me give anybody investment advice. That is not my lane. That is not what I do. Now, I might have an expert come on and advise a couple or something, but that's not me.
Right. You might be good at it yourself because you've been doing it for a long time, but it's not your expertise.
And so I'm not going to talk about it. I have a lane. Now, fortunately, human functioning is a pretty broad lane.
Right.
So I can talk about marriage, parenting, individual pursuit of goals.
Mental health.
Mental health, mental illness. There's a lot of, I have a broad lane so I don't lap myself right away. But there are things outside my lane, I leave those alone. And I'm going to stay in my lane and I'm going to do it authentically. And I think we have to know what that is and be authentic and own it. And I think that's very, very important. And then I think you have to star in your own life. I don't care if you're a teacher or a plumber or a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker. You have to decide, I'm going to take pride in who I am, and I'm going to be good at what I do. I'm going to be proud of what I do, and I'm going to be the star of my own life. And maybe that's in the way you give to other people, the way you parent your children, the way you spouse with your partner, or whatever. But I think we generate the results in life that we think we deserve.
Ooh.
And I can follow someone around and never speak to them and tell you a whole lot about that person. If I see somebody in a gray suit, a gray shirt, a gray tie, a gray bag, slumped over, shuffling along the street, I know that's what that person thinks they deserve. I don't have to talk to them because they generate the results in life they think they deserve. And if they're disheveled and they're tired and they're bent over and they're depressed and they're lonely, they're generating the results they think they deserve. We all do that. And if you see somebody that is genuinely happy, they're engaged and involved and they're looking around and they think that's what they deserve. People generate the results they think they deserve. And I can watch somebody and tell you what they think they deserve. Because that's who they surround themselves with.
Right.
It's the activities they choose. And the problem is you model that for your children. Somebody comes home and says, "How was your day at work?" "Oh, it's horrible. It's another day." You're modeling for your child to sell out, take a job you hate, but do it every day of your life. Don't model that for your children. What is that about?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Right.
That's not being who you are on purpose. That's being who somebody else wants you to be and modeling for your child that you grow up and sell out to what somebody else wants you to do, whether you like it or not.
Wow.
I hate when people do that. And I try to get people not to do that.
Right.
They say, "Well, it's easy for you. You've got enough money to do what you want to do." It's not about the money. It's about finding a way to be who you are in your own paradigm. And it's not about quitting your job and go flying freight out of Africa. It's finding a way to to shine in your own world, in your own orbit, in some way. It's how you do what you do, not necessarily what you do.
In this time, it seems like this. Maybe because I'm in LA, I see more of it like this, that it's really hard to find a quality partner that's a great match for you. In general, in the US, I'm speaking, it's hard for people to find a great partner and stay in a healthy relationship. I've heard people say that, 80% of being in a great relationship is picking the right person, is choosing the right person. I'm not sure if you would agree with that. But why do you think it's so hard for people to choose the right partner when we're always choosing something from a pain or from a need or a lack as opposed to a healthy, conscious, whole place?
Well, I think it is, you got to know what you're looking for. And I think, so many people, there's a difference between Mr. Right and Mr. Right Now, Mrs. Right and Mrs. Right Now. It's what is it you're looking for? And I think we have to know ourselves to know what we really need. And sometimes if we don't really know what's driving us, it may be insecurity, and we bring out the worst in each other. I see people all the time on stage where you've got somebody that's really dependent with somebody that's really over-controlling, and they bring out the worst in each other, and they think it's a perfect fit. Oh, we just fit like hand in glove, because she was very passive and he was very dominant, and so it just seemed like, wow, what a perfect match. It wasn't a perfect match at all. It was pathological from the get-go. She needed to get a backbone, and the last thing she needed was somebody dominant that played into her passivity. Is the worst thing they could do. You got to know, what is it that's attracting me to this person? Is it a pathological need to be controlled, or is it that I really admire this person? You got to really ask yourself, what is it that's attracting me to this person? Is it somebody that makes me feel safe in the moment, but it's not really what I need? You got to ask yourself, what's driving you in the moment? And a lot of people don't ask that question.
I mean, how do they, if someone has dealt with a lot of, trauma from their past, is it possible for them to choose a healthy relationship until they heal or start to at least work on that healing process? Or are they always going to kind of fall into that trap?
Well, I think you're going to do one of two things. When you enter a relationship, you're either going to contribute to or contaminate that relationship based on what you bring with you when you show up.
Right.
If you bring a wounded soul, if you bring open wounds, if you bring resentments, if you bring a lot of unfinished emotional business from being cheated on or hurt or abandoned or neglected, and you bring all that pain to the relationship, you're going to contaminate that relationship. Or if you've healed all of those things, where you come to a relationship saying, I want but don't need a partner, now you're going to contribute to the relationship. So I think if you are really hurt, you got to heal that hurt before you can go into a relationship and not contaminate it. It's like baggage. You're going to pick that baggage up and carry it with you and set it down in the relationship, or you're going to empty it out before you go. And I think that's why I think everybody should do an autopsy on the relationships they've been in before they go to the relationship they're headed towards.
What should they be asking themselves about previous relationships?
What did I do? What did I do to contribute to the demise of that relationship?
Not blaming them, but...
Yeah, they're gone.
Right.
they ain't bringing them unless it's a really weird relationship. What did I do to contribute to the demise of this relationship? Was I too passive? Was I too domineering? Was I too suspicious? Was I too naive? What did I do? Even if you were cheated on, even if you were abused, even if you were just completely run over in the relationship, what did you do to contribute to that so you don't do it again?
Right.
And if you can own whatever role you had in that, so you can adjust that and not do it again, then you've got a chance of not repeating those mistakes in this new relationship. You can't do that unless you do an autopsy on the one you've been in.
Sound advice right there. What about questions you should ask someone before you're going to get committed to them, whether that be in a marriage or just an exclusively committed, dating relationship, to know that you're setting yourself up for potentially a good relationship?
Well, you got to know what your deal breakers are.
Yeah.
There are deal breakers, right?
Right.
And you're not going to find a perfect candidate.
Right.
If you find an 80% candidate and the 20% that's not there aren't deal breakers, you can grow the 20% faster than you can find it.
Right, right.
Because you can say, well, I'm going to wait until I find 100%. Well, no, you're better off to take the 80 and grow the 20 or 10 of the 20 or whatever it might be, as long as they aren't deal breakers. And there aren't many deal breakers. Deal breakers are like physical abuse, drug or alcohol abuse, and they won't get treatment for it. They won't have, there are those things that if they have some of those things that are just non-negotiable, that if you were in the relationship and those things occurred, you would leave, then don't get in to start with.
Right.
If there's somebody that's going to hit you, don't get in.
Right.
Because if you were in it and they did, you would leave.
Right.
So that's a deal breaker. Don't get in. But you've got to decide, what are your deal breakers? If you are on this earth, Robin believed she was put on this earth to be a mother. If I was absolutely 100% committed in this life to not have children,
that
would be a deal breaker.
Yeah, right.
And she should know that up front. That wasn't the case, but had it been, she would want to know that. If her father was a bad alcoholic like mine, and she said up front, I will never marry a man that drinks. And as it turned out, I was committed to not being a drinker because of what my dad had demonstrated to me. And, we were kind of fated in that regard because she said, you drink? Actually, I don't. I'm sorry. Because I thought she wanted to go out drinking.
Right.
I was just telling her the truth. I'm not your guy. If you want to go clubbing, I ain't your guy.
Yeah.
I thought I was giving her the wrong answer. And she said, oh, okay. Little did I know that was the right answer. But you got to know what your deal breakers are. And, aside from that, you got to see if there's compatibility, if it feels right. There's got to be chemistry.
Right.
There's got to be chemistry. If there's not chemistry, you can't grow chemistry. That's there. That's either there or it's not. I don't care. I don't care if he's the most handsome guy in the world or she's the most gorgeous girl in the world. If there's not chemistry, that won't grow. You'll know that right up front.
Right.
And that's the way it is for some. Some people, you look like James Bond, and for some girl, it's like, it wasn't me.
They don't care. Yeah. What would you say is a non-negotiable for you both in your marriage on a daily basis? Whether it's we get up and say we love each other in the morning, or we give each other a hug every day, or a kiss, or is there like a non-negotiable we talk about what we're grateful for every night? Is there something you guys do that is automatic to support the growth and the quality of the relationship? Something small or big. We go on a trip every, out of the...
Well, I could say it on both sides.
Yeah.
This comes to my mind because I talked about it with a couple today. In almost 50 years of being with Robin, I've never called her a name or cussed at her, nor has she ever at me.
Really?
That not ever, never, ever.
That's inspiring.
Let me tell you, there are some women, and I'm talking about Robin like she's scary, and she's not.
She seems like a sweetheart. I
mean, she is. I mean, she's on my phone.
She's always smiling when I see her videos of her with you.
She's just a, absolute doll. And Yeah, you can see looking at her. That's not a posed picture. It's just her in the back of a helicopter. But there are some women you just look at and you say, would you ever call her a name?
No.
There's some women just don't. You just look and say, no, no. It's like, you just wouldn't ever do that. And nor would she me. She's never one time. It's something we just don't do.
Wow, 50 years, you never called each other a name.
Not one time.
That's incredible.
Really?
I mean, I don't know many relationships where they're not, when they're in an argument saying, well, you're this and this.
Oh,
and
no, it's not even been close.
That's beautiful.
No,
that's inspiring.
Well, maybe, but it's just never even been.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I've never even bit my tongue. It never even occurred to me to call her a name.
That's amazing.
Then maybe it's because I grew up in a very violent household.
Right.
I had 3 sisters, and they were in violent marriages, and my parents were in a violent marriage, and it was just something I just would never do. That's just not.
Yeah.
And that's just something that I could not accept myself doing.
You want to be proud of yourself.
I would not. I could not accept that from myself.
Okay, so that's one of the non-negotiables.
I don't think I can't think of a time I've ever called a woman a name.
Wow, that's great.
Ever. I might have turned and walked off.
Right.
But that's just not something that you do.
Right.
Maybe it's part of being from the South. You just don't do that.
Yeah, of course.
You just don't do that. And my sons, I've never heard my sons speak of a woman in a derogatory way.
That's beautiful.
Then they better not.
Right. You get a whooping. Yeah.
I just don't think you do that.
Yeah. Okay.
But
that's beautiful. I mean, I just hear of a lot of marriages that are, struggle, and there's name calling or frustrations, and it's just like that probably doesn't help develop more love.
Well, John Gottman is, I don't know if you've heard of
Gottman Institute? Yeah.
And he talks about the 4 horsemen, and those are the things that predict divorce in a relationship, and that sort of thing, name calling, is one of those things. It's defensiveness and stonewalling and aggressive, all those things that you get into that have to do with character assassination is one of those things that if you see people doing that, you can predict the demise of that relationship.
But you've worked with so many people. Is it fear? Is it insecurity? Is it the shame they hold on to? What would you say is kind of the main thing?
I would say it's comfort zones. I think people limit themselves and get in their own way. I think everybody does that, me included. Everybody gets comfortable in their own life, and before you know it, days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, months turn into years, and you look and you go, wow, I've been doing this for a long, long time. And I think it's really difficult and something that you have to consciously do to continue to challenge yourself to go to the next level. And then on the other hand, you can do that so much that you get what I call caught in ascendancy, where you're never satisfied where you are, and so you're always reaching for the next level. And there's some balance in between where you always want to better yourself and challenge yourself to go to the next level, but that doesn't mean you're not satisfied. I'm very gratified with the things that I do, and I'm very proud of the things that I do, but it doesn't mean that I'm not always looking for a way to do it better. We just started our 20th season, for example, but every summer, when we wrap the season, we take, 3 or 4 weeks to everybody decompress and go off on their own and stuff. But then we start meeting on a regular basis to start saying, okay, let's deconstruct that season. Let's start saying, what are some ways that we can do to tell our stories more effectively, to reach more people, to get out there more effectively. We're always trying to reinvent ourselves and stay relevant and say, how can we come back and do a better job than we did last year? Not that we didn't do a good job, but we want to do a better job. So I think people get in a comfort zone, and that's real easy to do.
What's your comfort zone right now?
I think I have been doing Dr. Phil, and I'm not talking about myself in the third person. I'm talking about
the show,
the actual platform for 20 years, and you hear people say this is the way we've always done it. Well, that doesn't mean that's the way we should do it. And I'm always challenging the staff to say, look, it doesn't matter how we did it last year or last 2 years. Is this the way we should do it? For example, people's viewing habits are changing.
Yeah.
Pacing has to change. The expectations that people are going to sit passively in front of a TV screen and let you dictate what they take in for an hour is pretty obsolete now. People get their information in smaller bits at a faster pace than they did when we started. And I think my number one competition now is myself on the internet versus watching me on broadcast television.
Interesting.
I get billions of views on the internet versus broadcast, where people, they want a 18-minute bite or a 20-minute bite, and I generate that content on broadcast and distribute it on the internet. And that's really the number one competition, because nobody else in broadcast is even attempting to do what we do. They have different subject matters. There's some great shows out there. They're just not trying to do what we do.
Right. I'm going to add another. You're a star also on TikTok. I saw you've got like 50 million views in your last video. That I was like, you're like crushing TikTok. You're all over YouTube. I mean, it's amazing how you've reinvented yourself to stay relevant with the different platforms. I was listening to an interview you had with Oprah, with Jay Leno, where you were like, when we started this 20 years ago, there was no social media, there was no
think about it. There
really
wasn't.
internet. I mean, it was kind of like just getting started.
It was. There weren't any of these social media platforms, which means we've had to really adapt over the years, because there was no such thing as cyberbullying, for example. And we've now had to learn, research, and study that, because kids are taking their own lives by being cyberbullying. I read a study. I read all the time. That's just I can't add 2 and 2 and get 5 every time, but I read really fast, and so I'm a voracious reader. I just constantly am gathering information and data. And I was just reading a study that like 1 in 3 girls were talking about the negative impact of Instagram.
1 in 3, like in the country, or just teens, or
teens, young girls.
Wow.
And so there's this impact of social media and putting expectations on girls in terms of their body image and all of that. And so those were things that weren't challenges we had to face then, and having to teach young people where they have to realize, look, I put this stuff out on the internet. They don't think that a college admissions committee is going to go look at that stuff when they're considering them for admission. A human resources group is going to look at that when they're considering them for hire. They're going to go back 10 years, 15 years, and see what they were doing when they weren't applying for a job, to see who they really are. And so you've got to teach them, look, you got to think about this stuff, because once it's on the web, it's out there forever. It doesn't go away.
Right.
And so just a whole different set of values that we're having to deal with that weren't even on the radar when we started.
What were some of the problems, I guess, 17, 20 years ago that are still the same today from human beings that you're seeing, and what is different?
Well, all the dynamics are the same in terms of, I think, interpersonal relationships. You have the same things from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s in terms of interpersonal relations. The number one need in all people is acceptance. The number one fear is rejection. And you can put synonyms in there.
Right.
Acceptance or success, belongingness, rejection or failure. You can put synonyms in for those things.
Embarrassment, humiliation,
And those things have been consistent generationally across time. But what's different within that framework is we're jumping a lot of steps right now. When I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, relationships formed in steps. You know, my mom would take, her mom would pick up. You know, we would hold hands at lunch. We would, you know, then go to a movie together and stuff. A lot of that is jumped over now because kids, they move so much faster. What we were exposed to on television then, there were 3 channels. You know, I Love Lucy, Gunsmoke, Dick Van Dyke. They were sleeping in separate beds on network television. Really? You watch Lucy and Ricky, they had them in twin beds, and they were sleeping in, they looked like snowsuits.
Wow.
For pajamas.
In the same room, but in different
same
beds.
room, but twin beds. That's what network would allow on. They wouldn't let the public see a husband and wife sleeping in the same bed. They were in twin beds with a nightstand in between.
Wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
wow.
that's what network television showed then. That's what was acceptable. That's what the censors would allow. Look at what's on network television now. It's what you would consider pornography back then. Right. And our kids at 10, 11, and 12, that's what they see now. 10, 11, 12-year-olds weren't seeing that back then. So they've jumped way ahead on the curve in terms of what their expectations are and what they're exposed to. So I think they get exposed to a lot higher levels of, deeper levels of physical, interpersonal, and emotional intimacy at an earlier age than they were back then, and they've jumped over all those steps. Well, they get deeper into a relationship without having done those preparatory steps. So they're much further into a relationship without having these trials before they get there, and so when the wheels come off, they're not prepared for it. You know, we have things in life that prepare us for things that come later, like we lose a goldfish, we lose a pet bird, we lose a cat before grandma dies, and that prepares us for death. We have dolls and pets that prepare us to raise babies and things. We learn on with lesser stakes for later in life when the stakes are higher. And now we're jumping over a lot of those steps where we get to high stakes interactions without some of those interval steps. And then when the wheels come off, we're not prepared. We haven't had those interval steps of learning before we got to the high stakes losses, and we're not prepared for it.
So what happens when people achieve success before they're prepared for it?
I think it's the same thing as experiencing loss before you're prepared for it. You haven't had those plateaus, those steps where you had a little bit of success and then you had some more and you learned to appreciate that. And, you know, with the internet bubble and some of these things, we've had some very young people that went to insane levels of wealth
and fame,
and they had no idea of, you know, what really usually goes into earning that kind of wealth and financial freedom and stuff. And you see it now in some of the pro sports leagues. I saw a statistic not long ago that 80% of professional athletes 2 years out of the league are either bankrupt or in serious financial straits, you know, dire straits financially, because they go from having very little, if any kind of financial independence or income, let alone wealth, to millions of dollars, and they don't know how to handle it. And then next thing they know, it's gone, and they haven't prepared for it. They don't know. You know, Shaq talks about the first time he got a $20 million contract. He didn't stop and think about, wait a minute, half of that goes to taxes. Right. So he was spending $20 million. He thought, okay, I've got 10 I can spend here, 5 here, and 5 here. And then they came in and said, no, wait a minute, you only had 10 to spend. You spent 20. And he's like, holy shit. And, you know, he says that. He says, I wasn't, nobody taught me about that. I wasn't prepared for it. And then I got caught in arrears in the beginning and had to play catch up. So they haven't been through those steps where they learn, hey, you got to pay taxes on this, you got to hold some things in reserve. And most people think that when you see all of these people get in trouble with credit card debt, they think, oh, people just went out and went crazy with their credit cards.
Right.
The number one reason they get in trouble is some kind of medical problem.
Really?
We have double income families, and then one can't work because of a medical problem. That's where they get in. It's not that they're out spending crazy, it's that they had a double income family and then one couldn't work, and now they're
struggling with
they're in
that.
serious trouble.
So I'm curious about your story a little bit, because when you were in college, you were studying psychology, but also you were this all-star football player, turned all-star tennis player in college on a scholarship. And then for essentially, call it 30 years, you were working, but it wasn't until you were 20 years ago when the season started, the first season started for Dr. Phil. And really that success kind of took off to another level by being one of the top talk shows. What was the challenge that you faced at that stage of your career, or since you had 30 years of working experience, roughly, did you feel really prepared for that level of success and fame?
Well, it was not a rags to riches story for me. That makes a great story, but that wasn't the story. I had, I was raised by a mother and father that were very loving, but my dad was a terrible alcoholic.
Really?
And when I say terrible alcoholic, I mean really bad alcoholic. He when he finally got a job, he had Wednesday afternoons off, and every Thursday morning was spent finding the car. Because he'd come home drunk and have no idea where he left the car.
Wow.
I had to find the car and get to school by noon, because if you weren't in school by noon on Thursday, you weren't eligible to play in the game on Friday.
Right.
I had to find that car and get to school.
So you're running around town trying to find the car.
Yeah, and I was in Kansas City. You had no idea where the car was, and I finally kind of learned what its haunts were, and you'd go around and find them. And it was not a good situation. But when I got on my own, I've always been very fortunate to kind of have a knack for making money.
Really?
And when I was very young, I was making more money than my dad was when I was 19.
Really?
And I've always been able to, to me, and it may sound cliche to say it, but I've always thought money was the cheapest commodity I had. It was time that was so critical. Money you can replace, money you can make. It's time that's really precious. And when I got married and had kids, that really came into focus then. And I've never, since high school, never really had a job. I had a job in high school, and since then I've always been in business for myself.
Really?
And I mean, always. I had a job in high school working for Hallmark Cards. I worked in their underground warehouse in Kansas City.
Okay.
They had an underground warehouse on 31st Street where they kept all their greeting cards. And I got a job working in it. It was carved out of actual rock. I mean, it was just carved out, and I worked there. And but after that, I never had a job. And I loved working for Hallmark. What a great organization that is, I can tell you. But I've always been in business for myself, and that really carved a philosophy for me. I used to read all these people that would say, well, so-and-so's philosophy was. I always thought, I must not be very smart because I don't have a philosophy. And I don't think those guys thought they had a philosophy at the time either. It was, you never have a philosophy until you get old and then people assign you one.
Right. The wisdom you have.
Exactly.
Yes.
Then they assign you a philosophy. I look back now and realize I've always had a philosophy that everybody's in business for themselves. I don't care if you're working for the post office.
Right.
I don't care if you're working for General Motors or some large company. everybody's in business for themselves. They just don't realize it. Even if you're an employee, just rank and file, you're still a company of one. And you've got to approach it that way and say, I am in business for myself. How am I doing? How am I presenting myself? What's my marketing plan? How am I moving up the chain? How am I, what am I doing? And I actually have been in business for myself all my life, but I've always thought everybody was. They just don't think about it that way.
But when you got into psychology, were you thinking, I'm going to, build a business and make a lot of money in the field of psychology, I guess, 50 years ago?
Well, I certainly approached it with kind of two things in mind.
Okay.
And one was, I recognized very early on that if you're going to get into a helping profession, you have to acknowledge that there are multiple forms of currency.
Okay.
If you're purely motivated monetarily, you don't want to get in a helping profession.
Right.
Because you can't leverage it, it's not scalable. And
usually a one-to-one practice is not scalable.
It's just not. And so if you don't have social currency, spiritual currency, the currency of giving something back and impacting people's lives, if those things don't matter, if those things don't fill the void for you, then you shouldn't be in that profession. And I told myself, if I ever got to the point where those things mattered less, then I'd stop doing it.
Wow.
And I really had a gut check moment.
Really?
For myself in that regard, because the average income for a PhD psychologist back in the 80s was like $48,000, $50,000 a year.
Right. Not much.
It really just wasn't much. And at that point, I was making, maybe a couple of million a year as a psychologist because I took an entrepreneurial approach to it.
Sure.
But I remember over Christmas break one year, I was down at the office with Robin, and we were just kind of wrapping up for the year and stuff. And I went up to the receptionist desk, and the appointment book was out there, and I looked at it, and it was solid for the entire year.
Oh, man.
It wasn't a 15-minute block in there, and I thought, oh, my God, I just don't want to do this.
Wow. What year was this?
This was in 88, 89.
Wow.
And I thought, I just don't want to do that. And there was a time when I would have thought, wow, this is great. You're building a practice, this is great. Because I had a hospital practice and another hospital practice, and we had groups, and we were doing a lot of biofeedback type things for pain management and stuff, and everything was just couldn't be better. And I thought, it just looked to me like 9 miles of bad road.
Wow.
I was just fatigued at it. I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. And that was my gut check moment of saying, if I ever got to that point, I'd say, I won't do this anymore. And to walk away from that was a real gut check moment. And I talked to Robin about it. I said, I said if I ever really wasn't all in, I would shut this down and walk away. And she said, are you serious?
Wow.
And I said, yeah, I'm serious. And I did.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Did you wait till the next year and finish the commitments or the appointments that were scheduled, or were you just like, this is the last year?
I referred them all out.
Wow.
I did everything you're supposed to do.
Sure.
To get them to the proper places, and checked all the boxes, shut it down, and moved on.
What did you do? I mean, did you have a game plan? Did you have a dream after that? Was it just, well, let's give it a year and figure it out, what comes to me?
Sort of, but not really.
Really? Well, I'm assuming you had savings and investments to...
No, it wasn't. We didn't like move into a cardboard box or anything. But I started 2 new enterprises, and it was clearly a gut check time.
Wow.
And I know Robin was talking to my boys a couple of years ago, and she said, your daddy's taking chances that would make grown men throw up, so don't think this was an easy road.
Yeah. I mean, we don't even really know who we are until how old do you think that we kind of form our real identity?
I think until you've been out and seen some of the world and had jobs and changed locations and gotten away from home and family and been on your own, where you've really found out who you are and what you're about, it's hard to know who you are entering into a relationship.
Yeah.
And that takes some time. And, when Robin and I got married, it was in 1976.
Wow.
And I had finished my bachelor's degree and master's degree, and I had, been out and been in business and lived on my own and completed 2 degrees in college. And at that point, I felt like I knew, a little bit about life and knew who I was coming into a relationship.
Right.
She always knew who she was. She was so much mature than I was going into it. It was astounding. And 45 years later, we get along great.
That's crazy.
Yeah. In this town, it's really crazy.
It's really crazy. When did you know that she was going to be your partner, your wife, your the person in your life?
I was not at all looking to get into a relationship when I met her. I was actually just visiting my parents, and she was a friend of my little sister's, and she came. I'd had the flu and was kind of stopped over there to kind of recuperate, and she came walking through the room. I didn't even know she was in the house. And she came walking through the room. She was there visiting my little sister. And whoa.
How old are you at this time?
I was 23.
Okay.
And 22, 23. And she was 19. And I very charmingly said, "Who are you?" And she said, "Well, who are you?" And we were there alone and visited for a couple of hours and went out the next night. And man, there was something about her from the very beginning.
Wow.
There was something different about her. From the minute I met her, she was, spunky and smart and obviously very easy on the eyes. But her personality just sparkled like crazy, and still does today. I can't spend enough time with her.
Wow.
Yeah, after 45 years, isn't that crazy?
Amazing.
Yeah.
What is the thing you love about your wife the most?
Her personality. It's kind of like when we decided, I always had a rule in the family that if we were going to make a big change, it took 4 yeses and 1 no. So I had 2 boys, and then Robin and I, so we're going to make a big change. It took 4 yeses and 1 no, even though Jordan at the time was like 10, 12, whatever. If we were going to make a change, if anybody said, no, don't want to do it, we'd not do it. So I remember when I came home and we talked about coming to LA and launching Dr. Phil, I'm telling Robin, I said, I talked to Oprah today, and she says, it's really time to launch your own show. We're getting an awful lot of mail. Come on, it's really time. So I hope telling her that. while I'm telling her, she's like getting boxes and packing shit. It's like she's got the spirit of adventure. It's like whatever.
She's already packing.
Yeah, we had a great life. We have a beautiful home on the golf course at Las Colinas in Dallas at the Four Seasons. Wonderful life. Couldn't be better. Kids are ensconced in school. Everything's going great. She's like, oh, really? She's packing stuff while we're talking.
Really?
Like, whatever, man. She's just like the spirit of adventure always. And I love that about her. And she is fiercely loyal. You don't want to criticize her husband or kids.
She would not be fun to be around.
She's 5'2" and 108, but you do not want to. You don't want to pick a fight.
Wow.
With her about husband and kids. She's ferocious, and I love that about her.
Wow.
And she's a lot of fun. She got a great sense of humor, and she's a small town girl from Duncan, Oklahoma.
Wow.
You ever been to Duncan, Oklahoma?
Never.
Yeah, well, it ain't there, and it ain't headed that away. It's the middle. You go another 10 miles and fall off the earth.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of nowhere. And she grew up poor like I did. Her dad had a driving range, and her job was they didn't have a ball picker-upper. She was the ball picker-upper. She had to go out with a bucket and pick up the balls.
They didn't have the cart with the fence.
No, that was her.
She was just picking it up, like dodging balls.
Occasionally would wear a football helmet if they were still hitting.
Wow.
But that was her. So she's
spirit of adventure. I love that.
Pretty scrappy.
What I think I saw her in a video somewhere with you a few years ago say that she's never missed an episode of Dr. Phil's show. This was I don't know if this is still the case. 20 years in.
Yeah.
3,500 episodes almost.
Yeah, we'll hit 3,500 this season, and
she's never missed one.
Never missed one. And
oh my goodness.
And she's not just the proverbial audience member. She is one of the foremost ambassadors in the fight against domestic violence in America. She's become our representative in that.
Wow.
And she's testified before Congress on those matters. She's developed an app for escaping those situations that's been honored at the United Nations and on Capitol Hill. I mean, she is very, very prolific in that arena, has a foundation in that regard. She's very, very active in that.
Wow.
She's a go-getter.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What would I'm curious, your 3 pieces of advice for having a happy, healthy, long marriage? Because a lot of people that stay together a long time, but they're not happy and it's not healthy. And I feel like they still say, well, we've been together for 30 years, but the kids know that they should have got divorced a long time ago.
Yeah.
So what would you say are your 3 pieces of advice for a happy, healthy, long-term marriage that makes you say, I can't spend enough time with her? And then what would you say is Robin's 3 pieces of advice? Is it the same or is it different?
Well, I can speculate about hers, but I think one that we share, I know because we've talked about it, and that is you deal with the issues when they come up.
Don't wait for them.
Yeah, people, people ask us, do we have, big fights and blow-ups and stuff like that? And the answer is we don't, because we deal with stuff before it gets big. It doesn't mean we don't have disagreements, because we certainly do. But we don't let things build up across time. We don't procrastinate emotionally. We deal with it when it comes up. And I think if you don't ever allow for unfinished emotional business, then you always keep the slate clean. Don't ever let there be unfinished emotional business, because then it builds up, and then one thing stacks on top of another, and then on another, and then on another, and resentment really builds out of that. And
sure.
We made a deal early on that we weren't going to do that.
So you guys have probably never really resented each other, because you've always dealt with the challenging stuff when it comes.
And, maybe in the moment, I might have said something or that she resented me saying it, but we dealt with it right then, and then it was over with. And so I think that's critically important.
Wow. Okay.
And, I think if people would really commit to doing that, I think it would make a huge, huge difference.
What's a way to approach that? By starting the conversation, if the other partner is always triggered by the emotional stress, or maybe there's some trauma they haven't healed yet or dealt with, where they resist it or they just try to lie, like how do you approach that conversation?
Well, I think the thing to do is you have to talk about that outside of crisis. You don't talk about it when something has gone off in the ditch. You never talk to a drunk about their drinking while they're drunk. You talk about it while they're sober.
Yeah.
You don't talk about issues and resentment while you're angry with each other. Talk about it while things are calm. And most people think, no, let sleeping dogs lie. I don't want to bring up an issue when there isn't one. No, that's when you need to talk about it. That's when you need to say, look, while we're getting along, let's make an agreement that if I do something that really gets on your nerves, you will tell me, and I promise to you that I will hear you out. And that's the time to talk about it. Don't try to solve problems during crisis.
Yes.
Make your plan outside of crisis. And I think that's really important. And I think, secondly, we have agreed that our objective when we disagree is not to get the other person to agree with us, but to be heard. In fact, you don't even need to respond. I'm going to tell you how I feel, and you tell me how you feel, and then we'll just walk away and let that sit with the other person. And you know what? If you really love each other and you really want to make the other person happy, most of the time you will find a way to get the other person most of what they want. But if your goal is you're going to agree with me, I'm going to make my point and you're going to agree with me, then you're making it a win-lose situation. And think about that. Think about when you were in high school and you were playing the Lancers. What were the signs in the hallway? Crush the Lancers, smash the Lancers.
Yes.
Do you really want a win-lose situation with your partner?
No.
Crush my wife, smash my wife. You don't want a win-lose situation. Let me tell you how I feel, and I just want to be heard. I'll hear what you say, and I'll let you be heard, and then let's drop it at that. And then we can come together and talk about it another time. If that's your objective, to be heard, it will work itself out. And that has really worked for us. We don't put it on a win-lose situation.
Right.
Because if it's a win-lose, one of us is going to be the loser. And I don't want to be the loser, and I don't want to be married to a loser.
Right. You don't always be winning and then your partner losing every time. Yeah.
Yeah, because if she's a loser, that's where resentment comes from.
Yeah. Okay. So that's number 2, right?
Yeah. That's number 2. And I think if people will, and that's a hard thing to do.
Yes.
That's really a hard thing to do because we want to win. We want to make our point, and
we want to be right.
Yeah. We do get to be right fighters, and we want to be right. And the other thing is, I think we really have to resolve that if somebody has to stop being all of who they are to be half of a couple, the price is too high.
Oh my gosh, that's the greatest thing you said. Because so many people are inauthentic in their relationships.
This doesn't work. If I got to stop being who I am to be half of the McGraws, it isn't going to work. And if she's got to stop being who she is to be half of the McGraw couple, it's not going to work. And I've told her before, because she said, I wish you would be more sensitive. And I'm like, nah, you really don't.
Wow.
You really don't.
Wow.
You think you do, but you really don't. Because you know what? You didn't marry a cheerleader. You married the middle linebacker.
Right.
And not that there's anything wrong with a cheerleader. And I mean that. I'm not saying that to be politically correct. There's nothing wrong with a guy that is more effeminate or more emotionally sensitive at all. There's not. But that's not what attracted you to me.
Right.
And if I became that, that's not who you married. And had I been that, and then I became more of a gorilla, that wouldn't be who you married. You married me, and there's a reason you did. You felt safe with me, or there was something about me that you were attracted to. Don't try to change it now. And there have been times where things went off the rails somewhere, and I stood in the gap, and she was like, yeah, I'm sure glad you are who you are.
Right. Yeah.
Because there have been times where we've been in situations where I needed to step up and be who I was, and she was like, man, I'm glad I married you.
I'm glad you're the linebacker.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But that doesn't mean that you can't evolve across time.
Yes.
And I think I've learned to be less cerebral and more emotional across time. But you can't ask somebody to stop being all of who they are to be half of the couple.
And what happens if your partner starts asking you to change?
Well,
as opposed to accepting kind of where you're at.
Like I have a range.
Yes.
Okay. There's a range where, like I'm over here in full Cro-Magnon mode, and then there's a range down here where, I can hold a baby. And
right.
I remember Jay had to have surgery when he was 4 weeks old, and I was on staff at that hospital, and so they allowed me to carry him into the operation room.
Wow.
And she'll never forget that image of seeing me walk down the hallway with his little head right here, and he was kind of crying, and I was carrying him in there, and she said that was probably the most tender scene she's ever seen in her life. That was at this end down here. So, you have a range in there. And so, yeah, you can move within that range. That's okay. But that is who I am. You can move within that range, but you don't ask somebody to be somebody they're not.
Right.
She'll ask me sometimes something like really great will happen. And she'll say, come on, give me something. Give me a happy dance. Give me something. Well, I'm not the kind of person that jumps up and down and yells, hey. But inside, I might be going, yes, this is really great. And it's a great sense of satisfaction to me, but I don't jump up and down and run around in circles. And, she'll jokingly say, come on, give me something. And I'll say, I'm very happy about this. And she'll say, okay, that's good for you.
Yeah. She's dancing around and exactly. Jumping on couches.
Yeah, exactly. And, my highs don't go real high, my lows don't go real low. And maybe that's boring.
You're like Tom Brady. You're just like, you're consistent.
Yeah, that's all I have in common with Tom Brady. But, I'm not real, I'm more cerebral than emotional. But inside, I experience, I'm very happy about it, but I don't run around with my hair on fire. Which is good, so I don't have much of that.
And what would you say are the three things that Robin would say are the keys to a happy, healthy, long-term, thriving marriage or partnership?
Yeah, I think she would say, first off, spending quality time together. I think she really values that quality time, and I think she thinks there's just no substitute for that. And by quality time, I mean intimacy, where intimacy being defined as sharing things that you would not share with anybody else on the world, in this world.
Can you give an example of?
Well, there are times that she and I spend together just maybe out on the patio, relaxed and talking, where, I have, my guard down, she has hers down, where we're just completely relaxed. We're not in any way
It's not business mode. It's not TV, Phil. It's not this.
We're not censoring anything. We're just completely relaxed and 100% candid with each other, talking about, life or family or dreams or whatever, things that we just wouldn't share with anybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to her, that there are things that we would say to each other that we wouldn't say to anybody else because we don't feel safe enough to say it to anybody else.
Wow.
And to me, that's intimacy, when you say and do things with that person that you wouldn't say or do with any other person in the world. Not your best friend, not your sister, not your brother, but it's just reserved for that. It has nothing to do with romance or sexuality or anything. It has to do with just trust and that uniqueness of that one relationship where it would not happen with another person in the world.
Right.
And I think she really values that. I know that because she's said so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and so when I say quality time, that's
intimacy time.
Yeah, that's what that means.
Okay. And what do you think would be here number 2?
Having each other's back no matter what.
Even if the person's wrong.
Even if the person's wrong. And that doesn't mean that privately you might not say, we might modify this situation, but publicly or otherwise, that there's never a doubt where you stand.
What happens if you don't, even for a slight little moment, don't have that person's back in a public or friend setting, let's say?
I don't know.
You've never experienced it.
I'm not going to find out.
Right.
And I've never experienced that
Wow.
with Robin, because that's why I told you a minute ago, you don't want to pick a fight with her by getting sideways with her husband or children.
Wow.
Because that's, to her, there's family and everybody else. And that's really core with her. And if you've been raised by an alcoholic, then you understand what I'm talking about. Because when you've been raised by an alcoholic, you've learned that you can't depend on the leader of the family to be there.
Right.
And when you become the leader of the family, you say, that will never happen in my family. Not 1 minute of 1 hour of 1 day will any member of my family ever doubt where I stand.
Wow.
And that is core to her soul.
That's beautiful.
That is core to her soul. That will never happen.
That is beautiful.
She's been where they've banged on her door at 3 a.m. with a bunch of drunk men out there saying her father lost their furniture in a poker game. And they pulled up in a truck and wanted their furniture. And she's seen her mother stand on the porch saying, "You're not taking our furniture."
Wow. Even if he was wrong, she's not, yeah.
"You're not taking our furniture." Her mother stood in the gap and said, "You're not taking our furniture. You're not taking my daughter's bed." Wow. And she said she knows what it is to stand by your family, and that's critical to her. That's core to her.
Seems like an amazing woman.
Yeah, she is. And that's why I said you don't want to get on the wrong. You don't want to get on the wrong side of her.
And what would you say the third thing is that she would say? You think?
I think she would say that you absolutely recognize that children. I'll put it this way. When you start being parents, you don't stop being wives, husbands, and lovers. Just because you start being parents, you don't stop being husbands and wives. And she has been so great about that over the years. The children joined our lives. We didn't join theirs.
Wow. What is the mistake most people make when they have kids?
Well, they really stop focusing on their role as husband or wife, and they start being totally focused on the kids, and they stop carving out time for each other. Now, there are going to be times when you do, like when the children are really young and you're up all night,
Right.
you're breastfeeding or changing diapers, or dad's getting up every other minute or mom's up every minute, and you're surviving those times. I'm talking about across the years.
Yes.
You recognize that those kids come and then they go, and when they go, it's the two
Just
of you
you two
there.
again.
And if you haven't known each other for the last 18 years, when they leave, you're going to be sitting there looking at somebody you used to know.
Ooh.
And you don't want that to happen. If you were really great lovers and intimate and best friends 18 years ago, and you haven't been for the last 18 years, and then they go off to college, you're sitting there looking at somebody like, didn't I used to know you?
Wow.
And I think she would say, you just don't ever make that mistake. Don't ever let that gap come in there. Now, in short term, of course, you sacrifice for your children whatever it takes for them to flourish and be nurtured and do what you take. But across time, across the years, you remember to nurture that relationship between the husband and wife. You remember that they're going to leave someday and it's going to be the two of you. Take care of that relationship so when they leave, you're not sitting there with a stranger.
And if someone has been stuck, though, for a while, or maybe they've been living in this kind of limiting belief for a while, maybe it's years, or they've just been in that pattern, how can they start to think differently and believe themselves when they've never seen the results or evidence that they deserve more?
Well, I can tell you this. Really small changes accumulate across time.
Absolutely.
And, you and I are sitting here right now in September, and people are listening to this whenever you're going to drop this. And the rest of this year is going to go by whether they're doing something about it or whether they're not.
Right.
Let's say there's 12 weeks left in this year. Those 12 weeks are going to go by whether somebody spends it losing a half a pound a week, setting a goal to look up a college curriculum, to explore a different job, to redefine their relationship with their spouse, to re-engage with their children, to whatever it is, making a small change each week or each day. It's astounding how much those small changes accumulate to big differences in a short period of time. We don't have to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Just make a little difference today and another one tomorrow, and then before you know it, wow, I'm really in a different place.
Right.
And that time's going to go by whether you're doing something about it or not.
Absolutely.
So you might as well be doing a little something.
What would you say is the thing you get to work on to get you out of your comfort zone over the next 12 weeks that maybe you've been, I should be doing more of this, or I need to take a look at this thing or assess this part of my life? Is there any area?
Me personally?
Yeah, you personally. This season of your life.
Next chapters. Because I'm always asking myself, and I know at this stage, my world's supposed to be getting smaller, and I'm supposed to be slowing down, and kicking back. But I still look at expanding my horizons. I'm looking at what is a new chapter I can challenge myself with. And I like to do things that, I like to take on things that are really outside my comfort zone. Like I mentioned, I'm not good at math. So when I was in graduate school, my teaching assistantship was statistics.
Okay.
Because it scared the bejeebers out of me. So I think I'm only 9 or 12 hours short of a PhD in statistics because it intimidated me so bad. I took every statistic course I could, non-parametrics, parametrics, Malinova's distance, analysis of variance. I took everything I could get because I thought I will not turn away from that. I will take this one, that one, this one, that one. I will not let this intimidate me. So I like to lean into stuff that intimidates me, except going to the dentist. I hate.
Oh, that's the worst, right?
Yeah.
I had 8 teeth. I had 4 teeth removed plus my 4 wisdom teeth when I was 17.
Oh my God!
And because I was supposed to get braces right afterwards. This was in the summer before football season, and I was like, man, I don't want to get braces right now and then have to wear this. My braces all messed up with the mouth guard in. I was like, let me wait till after the season.
That's the worst.
After the season turned into 20 years.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 2 years ago, I've had these 4 teeth missing on my sides for 20 years. And then 2 years ago, I finally said, I gotta, time is gonna pass. Let me get my Invisalign. Now I gotta get some implants back in, all this stuff. And that's happening in the next few weeks, but I put it off because I did not want to do it.
See, that's what I mean about relatability. I hate going to the dentist. Man. They give you all this bullshit about it's painless. Yeah, no.
Oh, no. Then they
it may be painless, but it's not anxiety-less.
For weeks leading up, you're like, oh, man. So what is the thing that's intimidating you or scaring you now?
I haven't decided yet, but I'm really studying that in my life right now and talking to Robin about it. And I don't know what it is, but I know there's another chapter that I'm getting ready to open. I just don't know what it is yet. But I know, and I wasn't even thinking about that 2, 3, 4 years ago, but now it's a really hot topic with me now. So I don't know what it is, but I know it's...
You feel like there's something. An itch for a new season, a new chapter of something.
New something. And I'm not sure what, but...
Is there any potential realms of what ideas or industries or where,
Not yet.
Not yet, but there's something. There's something calling you, pulling you.
Yeah, 100%.
Wow.
And but I don't know what it is yet. But I feel it.
Wow.
I feel it. I don't think it's going to take the place of anything I'm doing. Sadly, it's going to be an addition to what I'm doing.
You're going to add to the plate.
Yeah, exactly. Robin's already interrogated me about that.
What's the thing you're most proud of that maybe most people aren't aware of? Obviously, people know about the success. They know about the impact you've had on people's lives. They know about the financial abundance you've created and all the lives you've changed. But what's maybe something they aren't aware of that you're really proud about?
I'm really proud, and this isn't going to be a shocker to people, but I can be specific about it. I'm really proud of the young men that our 2 boys have become. And they're both very financially successful. I don't mean that. I mean, I've watched... My 2 sons are both fathers now. Jay has a daughter, Avery, and she's just 12, and his son London just turned 10. And my youngest son, Jordan, who's a musician on tour right now, and he has a young daughter that's just 5 months old and another one on the way. They decided to have them close together by design. He and his wife, Morgan, and Jay's married to Erica. And I've watched these 2 young men become fathers, and I've seen the depth of their commitment and their loving and caring and the gentleness with which they've stepped into that role. And I'm not surprised, but I'm really proud of the way that they've done that, the sacrifices that they've made. As simple as being up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a smile on their face, feeding the baby and stuff like that, and the husbands that they've become. And you always want your kids to thrive and be happy. And my goal was always I was going to work until I knew that my family was well provided for if I fell off the world tomorrow. And I didn't mean just financially, but that they were, happy and secure in their lives. And I've had to revise that goal because they're way past that. They're both really happy, and they're good citizens. They're good people. They treat people well. They're polite and caring. I see, Jordan's on tour right now, and I see him with thousands of fans around. He's always kind and nice to people, and the same with Jay. I like who they've turned out to be.
That's cool. How does someone heal and get to a place of healing in a relationship if they, one or all four of these things are happening? Is it possible to come back and love each other more than ever, or is that kind of hard to come back from?
No, I think there's power in forgiveness, and I think you have to step back and label these things and say, look, here's what we're doing, and this creates wounds, this creates pain that it's real hard to recover from, and we need to acknowledge that, and we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And if you can get a couple to acknowledge that and stop doing it and hold themselves to a higher standard of communication, then you can heal those, but you've got to be willing to forgive what has happened in the past. And forgiveness isn't a feeling, it's a choice.
Right.
Most people think that it's an emotion, it's a feeling, that you've got to wait for this feeling of forgiveness to fill your heart. And that's not true. It's a choice. You choose to forgive the person. Doesn't mean you forget.
Right.
But you choose to forgive them for what they've done and forgive yourself for what you've done. But it does do good to forgive it on Monday if you turn around and do it again on Tuesday.
Right.
So that means you've got to forgive it and then hold yourself to a higher standard and say, okay, instead of this contemptuous behavior that I show and calling names and assassinating their character, what am I going to do instead? How am I going to express my emotions in a less destructive way? And when you do that, then, wow, you say, this didn't last for 2 weeks, it lasted for 15 minutes.
Right.
And now we're having dinner. Wow.
Right.
And then we had a nice evening, and we were even laughing and maybe had a sexual encounter that night, and that had momentum into the next day. And gee, we're turning this worm, it's
turning it around. Better. Yeah. Is there anything else that's, you do on a daily basis that you always do, that's a consistent, that for you is a non-negotiable in your marriage?
I think we don't ever, even if we're traveling, we don't ever go a day without making eye contact. And to me, eye contact is something that has really, really fallen away.
That's powerful. Especially the phone's just like this, right? It's
and I've, I've played football in grade school, junior high, high school, college, and then raced motocross for a long time, and my elbows are really bad, and I can't button this button on my shirt. I try to do it with one hand, it takes forever. So forever, Robin always has to do this button on my shirt. And so every day that I have to change suits twice a day and all that. So Robin always buttons this button and stuff like that. So at least twice a day, she's always right here doing that button. And every time she does, we make eye contact right there when she's doing that button. And she will tell you that's a special quiet moment every day when she buttons that button and makes eye contact. Nobody knows what's going on, but that's a private moment twice a day when she knows my button and puts that on. That
what happens if in those moments you're maybe distracted or preparing for the next show that's coming out? Are you just like frantic? You're eating something, you know, it's just like your producers are in your ear. How do you stay focused and present in those moments?
When she's doing that?
Yeah, when she's...
You can't be that close to her and look her in the eye and be distracted.
Just like, okay, yeah, you're just there.
Yeah, you'd have to know she's... she'll get your attention.
Yeah, she'll run away. She'll do something.
No, she's...
That's beautiful. Eye contact. Yeah. I think people have lost the art of eye contact, like you said. It's something that I love to talk about and I almost love to be awkwardly looking people in the eyes.
Yeah.
To see, can they look at you back, you know, whether it be in an intimate relationship or a friend. I do this with hugs also. Yeah. I hug people for a really long time.
Yeah.
To see like, okay, can they be intimate and connected, or is it uncomfortable for them?
I've got a new show on CBS, a new primetime series called House Calls with Dr. Phil. And the first thing that I've done with a lot of these couples that are in such dire straits is just have them stand up and make eye contact. And you would be astounded at the difference it makes when I make them stand there and make eye contact.
What happens when they do that? Just for a few seconds, minutes?
I make them stand there and make eye contact. And I have them, the first one I had them make eye contact and really hold it way past the point of comfort, and then say one of four things. I trust you, I don't trust you, I don't know if I trust you, or I'd rather not say. And
what usually happens?
It's a real powerful moment.
Wow. These are people married.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the first episode, her son had died from a drug overdose, and she blamed her husband for cutting him off. And they really hadn't touched in 2 years.
Oh, man.
And in that moment, they hadn't really looked at each other, and she looked him in the eye and just totally broke down and collapsed in his arms and said, "Of course I trust you. What have I been thinking?"
Wow.
Just in the first 30 seconds of that episode, just making eye contact brought him back to, what am I doing?
Why do you think we're so afraid to connect in the eyes?
It's intimacy.
I could talk to you for many hours about this, and hopefully I can have you back on sometime in the future, Dr. Phil, but I want to ask a final few questions to wrap things up. And again, thank you for your time and all of your years of wisdom. Very relatable, and I think this relationship section specifically is going to be powerful for a lot of people. This is a question I ask everyone towards the end called the 3 truths. It's a hypothetical question. I'd like you to imagine that you get to live as long as you want to live on this earth, but eventually it's your last day. And you continue to accomplish all of your dreams and have the relationships you want to have. But for whatever reason, in this hypothetical scenario, all of your content has to go somewhere else. It's not here on earth anymore. So all of your shows, your videos, your books, this podcast, it's gone for whatever reason. But you have 3 lessons you get to share with the world. I call it 3 truths. The 3 things you would kind of leave behind as lessons for people to live by. What would you say would be those 3 truths for you?
I think number 1 would be you get one bite at this apple. It's no dress rehearsal, so don't waste time. Because I do think we, like I said, let days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, and then we look back and say, where did it all go? This is not a dress rehearsal, so grab on and make the most of it. And I think I think secondly, I think people really struggle with that existential crisis of, feeling emptiness at different stages in their life. And I would tell people, when you feel that emptiness, the best way to fill it is to give away that which you need the most.
Ooh, yes.
If you're feeling lonely, find someone that you can see and tell is more lonely than yourself, and give them what you need. We've been through this quarantine. There are people, maybe it's an elderly person living in your apartment building or down on the corner, and they're alone, they don't have family, and you're sitting there and you're feeling disconnected and alone and empty. Go give to that person, knock on their door, back up 6, 12 feet and say, hey, I know you're here by yourself, and I'm on the way to the store. Can I pick something up from you and leave it on the front porch? You probably don't want to give me your cell phone number, but here's mine. If you would like to FaceTime and talk, or if you're mowing your yard, just keep going across your driveway and mow theirs. Give away what you need the most. I promise you, it will fill you up faster than anything you can do.
Yeah.
Give away what you need. It will heal you faster than anything you could ever imagine.
Yeah. Okay. That's number 2. Number 3?
I would tell people to really be your own best friend. We judge people really harshly, but we don't realize how harshly we judge ourselves. And, I had the privilege of being friends with Maya Angelou before she passed. And, she's known for being such a great poet and all, but she was also a really good woman, and had a great sense of humor. It was a lot of fun. But she said something one time that really struck me, and she said, you did what you knew how to do, and when you knew better, you did better. And I think that really describes the human experience. I think we do the best we know how to do at the time, and when we know better, we do better. I say that to heroin addicts. They say, I'm a piece of shit heroin addict. That's what, you're doing the best you can today, and when you know better, you'll do better. We got to cut ourselves some slack, and we need to be our own best friend and not judge ourselves so badly. When we have more tools, we have more coping skills, we'll do better. Just don't give up. I'm the incurable optimist. I truly am. And I think that the human race is going to be okay. I know right now we're not getting along as a society, and we're divided. And people say, oh, it's the worst division we've ever had. Well, I guess they forget about the Civil War.
Right.
Everybody kill everybody. I just tell everybody, don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
You're doing the best you can. If you want to do better, learn better.
It's creating this vision for your life that's compelling. But there's this other thing. And I love Think and Grow Rich. It's one of my favorite books of all time. Next to my scripture is my favorite book. But you don't just think and get rich. You have to do things. And by the way, rich can mean more bliss, more happiness, more peace. But you don't just get those things by thinking. There's some things you have to do.